the barrier to entry for certain kinds of fab is actually pretty low.
What you just described is interesting because barriers for entry are low. Okay, that's true. I could put a plasma cutter in my garage and I've got a fab business, but customers, they can move around really easily. They have mobility.
Welcome to the Next Gen Metal Fab podcast. I'm your host, Tim Heston. In each episode, my co-host, Oshcutt's Caleb Chamberlain, and I will bring you conversations about what the future could look like for precision sheet metal and tube fabrication.
Discover your path to leadership excellence at the FMA annual meeting, February 25th to the 27th in Chandler, Arizona. This premier event offers a unique opportunity to connect with prominent figures in the fabrication and metals industries, enabling the exchange of ideas, collaborative solutions to business challenges, and the cultivation of strategic relationships. Visit fmamfg.org for all the details. And now, back to the episode.
Thanks so much for joining us for yet another conversation about kind of the future of the custom metal fab industry. And this time we're going to kind of focus on potential growth aspects over the next few years about new ways that fab shops can grow and gain market share. But yeah, Caleb, talking about your shop, obviously it's quite a different business model. Just provide some opening thoughts about how you feel technology and software and a lot of the new kinds of approaches that the industry is seeing, how that's going to affect how shops get born and how they grow over the years.
Yeah, this is such an interesting subject because I think there's a lot of interest in manufacturing in the US right now. There's this reshoring trend. There's a lot of private equity groups who are looking for places to put money where there can be a stable, steady kind of return. There's obviously a lot of political interest in uh, restoring the United States manufacturing dominance, right? To the extent it needs to be restored. I think we're still a manufacturing powerhouse, but and a lot of things changing with technology as well. There's a lot of pressures and trends and things moving around that will have an impact on how businesses grow and what the landscape looks like in 10 to 20 years. Um, and I think one of the things that I've talked to a handful of private equity groups recently that they're interested in doing this. And one of the questions is, well, why is it so fragmented still? Why is manufacturing still fragmented? And
Right.
Tim, you've talked about this before, probably many, many times, and you and I have talked about it. But the phrase you've used, Tim, that I really like is that manufacturing is a technology, not an industry. So this idea, it's kind of like asking, why hasn't software consolidated? How come there's still thousands of software companies? Why isn't there just two or three main players that write software? And it's like, well, come on, that's a nonsensical question, right? Uh, Software is a tool, and there's a million ways it can be applied, and it's kind of the same with manufacturing. Different industries care about different things. Medical is different from automotive, is different from aerospace, is different from like consumer goods. So yeah, it's totally different depending on what you're trying to do. And that's actually so. What there's I think two trends that I think are going to happen when it comes to how manufacturing tech is going to consolidate in the future. And one of those ways is there will be this horizontal consolidation, I think, where you've got a generic job shop that offers value add services that sit in the stack between the mill on the top end and the customer on the bottom end. You've got a job shop who's doing cut and bend or cut, bend, tab, powder coat. And that generic job soft service, I think, is going to become democratized, enabled by technology, which will break down regional barriers. And then on the other end, we'll see continued consolidation in the same way we've seen in the past, which is a company will learn how to sell into a particular industry really, really well. And and they will vertically integrate with software to make that even better. And the players that figure out how to do that will tend to aggregate and pull in a whole bunch of the volume. So there's two ways to scale in this new tech-enabled world. One is let me give you an example of a vertical case. I'm kind of speaking generically. My wife and I bought a Tough Shed. We've all heard of that brand, right?
Yeah.
But go to their website. They've got this online tool where you can design a shed and visualize it in 3D and configure everything and even pick the colors and the trim, the shelves on the inside, the kinds of vents, the slope of the roof, the height, length, width. You design it, they build it in their factory, and it shows up in 2 weeks. And now you've got a shed custom designed for your house. And
Right.
it's not just that they're a shed manufacturer, they've integrated the entire stack vertically from software and web presence all the way to manufacturing, all the way to the network for installing that. So what does that do? Well, they've expanded into this vertical industry, which is custom sheds, and they've used technology to make that extremely streamlined and easy to do and fun. And I'm not saying they're the best, and there's always problems, but uh, this isn't
But
supposed to be an endorsement of Tough Shed, but it's an example of how you can take tech like software and make a particular experience really, really good.
going back to the story that was in the fabricator, a lot of shops do grow on the backs of some core elements of core customer base. Like we just did a story on Keel, which is a new a new kind of umbrella company over Merrill and a few other large fab shops focused on aerospace and defense. And now, obviously, there's Cadrex, which is focused on the information technology and data center business, and so there's always that customer niche that they kind of grow on top of saying, all right, then you've got, heavy equipment and ag equipment. Some large fab shops are to that. But then what do you see the potential for just kind of more horizontal growth? You mentioned something about horizontal, it's like totally across the board, nothing's dominant. Uh,
Yeah, that's the thing that I think is very new. And I admit to a little bit of bias because we're growing in this way and our competitors are too, and faster than us. I will admit that they're scaling in really impressive ways. It's pretty cool.
mm,
Um, but the general idea is that you've got all these job shops and some are going to scale on the back of vertical integration, like we talked about, and very particular sales strategies in the particular industries. On the flip side, there's this slice of the supply chain that just says, "Hey, we've got lasers, we've got brakes, we've got other equipment." And for customers that aren't set up in a way that they want to bring that internally, they're gonna buy out. And we're gonna be one of the shops they can go out to buy out.
right.
Make versus buy, like you were just talking about. Um, and it's an interesting mix of customers because at a certain scale, vertical integration for the downstream clients makes total sense. But so the big question is why today are there, tens of thousands of job shops that are providing these middle value add services? Why
Right.
hasn't anybody just gobbled up that volume? And I think part of the problem is that you've got regional barriers and you've got scale barriers, and software fixes both of those things.
Right.
I think.
Explain that for me. How does that work? How does that fix both things?
Well, let's talk about our competitor, Senkai Sen. They're building their third shop right now. They have a centralized ordering interface, and it's targeted for a particular kind of customer. And anybody who visits their website will see that. But you can't, we'd say in engineering or mathematics, without loss of generality, this is what's possible. Meaning, they are targeting a particular market, but that can be expanded by anybody who copies this play, or by them, or by us. And so what it says is they've got a centralized ordering interface that's automated and therefore intrinsically scalable. They've got geographic presence within one ground shipping day to almost every metropolitan area in the United States. And they can aggregate everybody who's willing to order in that way. All right. So that eliminates geographic barriers. And one of the reasons that allows some really interesting scale is now you've got, let's say you've got 100 fabricators, they're doing 1 million each. A single fabricator that's doing 100 million each has way better scale economies and better purchasing and supply chain power than 100 individual shops. So they will gain an intrinsic advantage by having scaled horizontally across geographies enabled by software. So what's going to
Right.
happen? Well, it's going to be hard for a traditional shop in that particular space to compete. So traditional shops are going to have to integrate vertically, or they're going to sell, or they're going to go out of business, I think.
Right.
And this is going to be over decades. The next 10 or 20 years, I think, is when we see this play out. So the horizontal aggregators are going to say we can offer these value add services extremely efficiently and capably and fast and for cheap. Um, and that's
Right.
going to just tend to soak up volume, especially as the industry gets more and more interested in ordering online instead of using more like walk into the shop relationship techniques.
Right, right, right. Now, there's some legacy practices with engineering and prints that has some inertia. If there's some inertia at play, for instance, you have a hard, it's hard to automate the print, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's so much information in the print, specifically when it comes to welding and downstream, and there's all this, but the so there's difficulty there, but when it comes to in make versus buy, the fundamental is still there, where it's if you're a product line manufacturer, because the cost, especially since the cost of equipment's going up and up, um, then it makes less sense to actually invest it in-house because, well, what if the product line changes? What if there's a better method? Like, what if there's a different material that actually makes sense for this product? So you buy millions of dollars worth of sheet metal automation, and then a competitor comes in and makes it out of composite.
Mm.
And then the entire manufacturer, so now your competitor just totally shifted, and they grab market share because it is a better product, because it's better material, and all your capital's tied up in sheet metal.
So you're kind of suggesting, Caleb, it's a little more complicated than that. Nobody's going to be able to really aggregate horizontally because there's just too many ways to manufacture.
Well,
Is that kind of
no, I'm just saying, no, that's part of the argument for contracts. So in other words, it's part of the argument of why I mean, you have some outliers, of course, that have innovative approaches, that have very strong product lines, and they've done a risk analysis, make versus buy analysis, and it makes sense. It was an argument for the reason why custom fab is a solid business model, is that because if you have a product line, the risk of a specific manufacturing method is too high to invest in the entire vertical supply chain, so you don't have to outsource to anything.
So I'm a business owner. I've got a product. We've got legacy. We're scaled. We've got legacy systems, but we can go invest in a laser or 5 lasers, and then find out that it was the wrong way to manufacture the product.
Right, right, right.
Or
Now,
or we can go somewhere else in the value chain and sign a contract with someone and say, "Hey, make these," and now our hands aren't tied.
it'll be interesting because what we're seeing because of the evolution of technology, is there's this long tail of lower cost machines and lower and older technology that, I mean, if you can get a CO2 laser, and obviously we have other tools out there where and a plasma cutting table, let's say. And so if you have 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 a niche where, hey, somebody down the street or somebody within a radius needs certain parts, and you have relationships, the barrier to entry for certain kinds of fab is actually pretty low, relatively speaking, than it's been. It's getting to that next level of, all right, I'm gonna buy a new fiber laser or an automation, or getting to that next level where then, okay, we're talking tens of millions of dollars. And but we're seeing is that, I mean, heck, I talked to, that fab shop. There's a fab shop in Missouri, and I think we'll be covering them again because of the guy. I talked to. He was at 18 years old when he launched his shop, and today he's in his early 20s and bought his first laser already. But he's already, he started paperless. With Google Sheets, it's easy. It's like, why even have paper? He's a software native, and it's nothing. It's nothing. outlay. It's nothing out there, but it's really just kind of pragmatic. And he realizes, yeah, we'll have to build off this to actually scale up further. But it's a great piece.
Yeah, I kind of tend to think often that there's just real power, real scale power that's possible, but really there's probably a ceiling to how much economic power you can command with, say, service centers where you're buying metal. And the scale you'd have to achieve to like bypass service centers is just tremendous and almost impossible unless you're really growing on the back of a narrow set of materials, probably. But what you just described is interesting because barriers for entry are low. Okay, that's true. I could put a plasma cutter in my garage and I've got a fab business, right? Right. Meanwhile, customers have a ton of for the most part, unless you're doing like turnkey services, which is another way you can vertically integrate. But customers have a lot of they can move around really easily. They have mobility. So
Right.
barriers for entry for shops are low. Customers have mobility. So if you have a relationship with a company and you go out and put a uh, a cheap laser cutter in your garage or in a small shop, you can serve that customer probably better than any generic horizontally aggregated, or scale player in the market. So I think you're right. Actually, there might be a lot of
Well,
continued resistance to consolidation and
well,
manufacturing with technology.
and I think this is part of the transition because, like, over the last 20 years, what I've seen is, a lot of shops grow to about 10 million or, 15 million, maybe 20 million. But then, the on-time delivery suffers. It's very, but it's because of, there's just been a lot of, it's difficult to scale thousands and thousands of different part numbers without some kind of software automation. So if you have, if you have, so they focus on those large volume orders. So they have that large the few large volume orders that they really focus their business on have a long tail of low volume orders. But that long tail of low volume orders, often it's delivered late because they need to service their major whale accounts, so to speak. And so it delivered late. So perhaps a shop supervisor at that fabricator goes off and launches his own business and hustles and brings some smaller customers with him, and he has less overhead. So then he hustles and he gets it, and that's kind of has been kind of the growth cycle of the industry where you've had
Mm.
this kind of
I don't
ceiling of about 10 million. They kind of struggle to grow more, but then they have some really great talent within there and they jump off and they just launch a shop of their own and they start around 2 million, 3 million, 5, and then they grow. And then then now we're getting to the point now where all these investors are looking at all these shops that have gone through that cycle. Well, why don't we put these together?
There are software vendors that are building modular software tools that help job shops specifically. And one of those is Fulcrum, and one of those is Paperless Parts. And there's a bunch. I don't know all the providers. So it's possible that you might be able to bolt on enough of these, and maybe they talk to each other enough that you beat the scale problem. But um, at Oshkosh, we're doing 2,500 unique part numbers every single week, and 90% of what we ship, we will never see again, statistically.
Right.
So I don't think we could do that with modular software packages that exist today. I
Right.
think the only way to actually scale that business model is to have your own software team writing bespoke software for your company. And it's a different kind of company, very much so. But
But
yeah,
Well, and you guys are a different kind of company along with Sencut Set and the others where you are focusing on the prototype and you're not gonna see it again, but many companies don't wanna grow like that. They wanna
that's fair.
they want, to grow that contract work. They'll see different kinds of work from the major core customers, but you're always gonna wanna have a diverse customer mix, but you wanna grow the revenue with that customer to become their contract supplier. That's why, when I covered shops, they say, no, we're not a job shop. We're a contract manufacturer because it's a contract and we have long-term relationships and that's how we want to grow. We don't want to be a one and done shop. We don't even want to touch that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
You
so
have to change the structure of your entire company.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the machinery is really geared toward that, to be honest. We've got, you know, we got automated towers. We've got it's built for quantity, and it's built for what I call high kit based high mix quantities. So you have a high quantity of parts, but you are producing in small batches to deliver quickly and continually to drip feed to the supply chain, and that's how you become a quote unquote co-maker is what somebody told me. It's like, just so close that you're drip feeding and we're no longer moving huge batches. That's the evolution. We're in a small batch world, but we're also still in that contract world.
Contract work like that gets gobbled up by horizontal integrators.
Well, especially early in the product cycle, right? So, if you're testing something out and you're seeing if you want a prototype or if you're not even sure this product is going to fly, then yeah, because you can't your regular supply chain, they don't want that onesie-twosie stuff, and you can't get to it. It's hard to find a new fab shop because they're not gonna want a, 5, 10-piece order. They're not going after that. So they need that service, and they'll always need that service. But then beyond that, it's like, all right, well, ideally, we wanna spread the risk of our supply chain, and be great if we could contract out the assembly, contract out, and maybe even have, you know a lot of fab shops end up becoming, white good players where they just basically do everything. They slap the label on it and they just ship it directly to the end consumer, and they handle the supply chain. They handle
Yeah.
the purchasing, and so that's another business model altogether. So
Another way to scale and another way to preserve margin in a very competitive industry is you
exactly. So
develop a turnkey solution and you make it happen. Yeah.
right. And then there was another story I read into the Texas shop AEI who they are a small shop and they want to stay a small shop. They don't want to scale up, but they also focus solely on material handling and customized fabrication solutions. So they do not work with traditional make to print. They work with just, hey, what do you need this material handling solution for your plant? We're going to visit the plant. We're going to walk through and it's like, all right, we're going to figure something out for you and design from the ground up.
Wow.
And so that's their niche. And this, the guy comes from a large fab shop, had a large fab shop in California. He doesn't want to scale up. He says, no, I'm perfectly happy with this small, and being small but offering value, that's sustainable. Being small and offering a commodity is not. You know what I mean? So,
Wow, that is such a powerful statement, actually. Being small. Wait, can you say that again? Being small and offering a commodity does not.
being small and offering value is sustainable. Being small and offering a commodity is not. Where you
Yes,
just
that is great.
yeah.
That's really true. And I actually think that between you and me and everybody listening to this podcast, one of the things that I worry about is that the on-demand space will become commoditized.
Right.
So you have to scale if you want to do
Yeah.
on demand.
Well, it's yeah. And it could be either you guys, and or it could be the brokerage model too, right? So you've got, and so which
Brokers will continue to work unless, because okay, brokers are the horizontal aggregator without like touching the vertical component at all. What I mean by that is like a broker is going to say, well, I'm going to provide the infrastructure to connect buyers and sellers or service providers and customers.
right.
And we're going to take a kind of difficult process and we're going to automate it. And that's quoting, right? So these brokers are providing quoting at scale and connection at scale. And that is very valuable in today's climate. Okay. But what happens when 2 or 3 major job shops scale horizontally, vertically integrate the whole stack from quoting to manufacturing? And now there's 2 or 3 major shops that can do everything the broker can do in-house. What happens to the broker model? For that matter,
Right.
what happens to modular software service provider value when there are so few job shops trying to do that kind of work? Like,
Well, part of that is the sandbox theory where, it used to be, I mean, back in the day, we used to, it used to be that few fabricators had machining capability. Now machining is in the sandbox most likely.
Mhm.
You have fabrication capability, and then you have a machine shop to add value either for your end assembly, tooling, or both. Uh, and then now we have, a MEC making statements that they're getting into plastics.
Mm.
And or some other lightweighting, focusing on the lightweighting. I'm not sure if it's plastics or not. Don't quote me on that, but it's a different. But their customers are looking for lightweight materials, and so It's just a matter of how broad can you scale with the sandbox? How can you really be experts in all these processes? Because it used to be, it's like, no, I'm a machine shop. I'm not going to get into fab. Well, now it's beyond that. So but hey, am I going to get into plastic injection molding? Am I going to get into 3D printing? Am I going to get into this, that with all this tooling costs?
I Okay, so this is so interesting. I think that technology not only makes software more accessible for shops that want to integrate it themselves, it's easier to write software now. So that's a thing. The other thing is that machines are just like we talk about CNC press brakes with offline programming and a bunch of automation. It's way easier to be really good at precision sheet metal today than it was 20 years ago. Right.
Right.
So there's some democratization of the actual technology and the software that connects customers. Right. So I think the likely end state of all this is that it is actually possible to be an expert at CNC machining and sheet metal and 3D printing and injection molding, and the list can go on. And the company gets big for sure.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out because, the old iron dies hard, so to speak. So it does. We've got. In fact, I'm just writing a story about a large contract fabricator in Indiana about their laser cutting scheduling strategies, which they've changed, but it's a matter of they have a 9-year-old CO2 laser, and they've got a 1-year-old fiber laser that can outpace anything. And it's just this amazing differentiation in technology between them. And it also requires different kinds of expertise. And it also requires a surprising amount of expertise to really do it on a consistent basis, specifically because if your material is not consistent, if you have tip ups, you have all these things that they've got to look at. The devils are in the details.
Mhm.
And so it seems easy, but then when you scale up, it's kind of like it's kind of like every pebble can have a more dramatic effect in
Yeah,
the
cause a landslide.
it's just like in structural fab where we've written about these amazing front end automation beam lines, and the skilled labor problem has become even more acute, even though the machines are easy to use, but you have to have the right information and you have to make sure he's pressing the right job. He selected the right job. If he doesn't select the right job, he just produced a ridiculous number of beams we will not never need. Bam, done.
Yeah, yeah. So this is maybe getting too specific, but that software problem, that's totally solvable with software.
More integration, yeah, and so as long as you have that, then you have a Ferrari that is well tuned, and you won't crash into something.
The software problem is hard because I mean we found that we have a growing list of projects that we want to tackle and it never ends, and it gets really expensive to try to maintain a million lines of code.
Right.
But we're getting off the beaten path here, maybe from the original subject, but AI is such a buzzword right now that it almost makes you want to roll your eyes when you hear the word. Even me too, even though I'm super excited about it. But the killer app for AI is not like virtual assistants and it's not automated customer support because customers hate it, right? Nobody wants to talk to an AI, even if it's good. Um, the killer app for AI is software development.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
AI is going to make every job shop a software powerhouse. So what will that do?
Right, right.
And that if so we're circling all the way back, I apologize. Circling all the way back to the beginning, we talked about vertical integration. We talked about this tough shed thing. Every product you can imagine that's made out of metal um, is going to have a vertically integrated turnkey software thing, where some shop has figured out how to tie software in to make that experience extremely good
Right.
for that niche. And so everybody's going to integrate vertically in that way, or they're going to do what Oshcut is doing, and they're going to integrate horizontally and try to capture just the slice of value add in the middle. And it's all going to be powered by software, facilitated by AI.
Yeah. I read a great story in the Wall Street Journal where it was kind of, about investors saying, "Wait a minute, are we at the top of a dot-com bust for AI? Is AI overhyped, and et cetera, et cetera." And it made me think kind of about, all right, what are the two extremes of where AI could go and how it could affect metal fab? And the one extreme is what you say, which it could transform everything and allow scalability in areas we thought never could be possible and utterly change the fab shop for the good. I wrote a pie in the sky AI story a couple of years back where I said, imagine a time where the schedule changes every second, where everything just adapts exactly to the perfect flow through the shop floor. And this allows you to automate in ways you've never thought possible. So you've got that, which is totally scalable, or AI becomes basically an advanced form of autocorrect or advanced, or just an advanced Google search. But that's great, but it just doesn't really live up to its promise because all the pieces of the puzzle are not talking to each other. And it's just you've got all these silos of amazing technology that don't come together to produce something great.
Well, a year ago, I would have thought, well, yeah, it's fancy autocorrect. I don't think so anymore. I think
Mhm.
we're far enough along to see that, like, the ability for a computer to write code to solve a problem on the fly and execute that code, um, is going to change fundamentally the way that uh, software is written, and it's going to fundamentally change the way we interact with systems and computers.
Yeah.
Think about like a mobile robot. Um, think of a toy mobile robot, and you say, "Hey, I want to play a game of tag." Well, the mobile robot's running this AI. It doesn't know how to play tag per se, but it sure can write a behavior tree program that allows it to, on the fly, figure out how to play tag, run that into its behavior model, and now you've got a robot playing tag with, you know, um, like that's possible today.
Right.
And I guarantee people are working on that kind of stuff, like on demand, on the fly, self reprogramming, where the dominant feature of the computer is that it can do that and that it can have a mobile robot respond to that, right?
Right.
Like there's some really, really interesting things.
And obviously, at FabTech, we're going to see more AMRs than ever, and actually, it's already here where you've got systems where the robot places a sheet on the AMR, and the AMR travels to the press brake, and the robot picks it up. It's already there. The amount that setup and programming time is the issue. But what you're saying, and what I hope will happen, is that no, that they'll learn themselves, and it's going to be, that's where the truly flexible automation will really change things for the better.
Yeah, the most powerful, most wealthy companies on the planet are all universally working on that precise thing. Like they're very motivated to make it
Right.
happen. So I think it's going to happen,
Yeah.
and it's going to happen fast.
And I just hope, my hope though, as an industry reporter, is that they get input from the operators on the machines, and they get input from the folks who know sheet metal on the manufacturing end, because that disconnect between software and what actually happens between the tool and the sheet metal was profound years ago, and has closed tremendously over the years, as you've talked about with the tailored job shop ERPs, etc. But I think we're on the right track. So, well, it's almost we've talked about the gamut here. So I think we'll close this up. Thanks so much for joining us again for this episode of the Next Gen Metal Fab podcast. And in future episodes, we'll be welcoming other fab shop leaders out there in the industry to join us in new dynamic discussions about what's ahead, how the industry is transitioning to what Caleb and I, we've been talking about, a very different future. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you later. Can't wait.
The Next Gen Metal Fab podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The show is hosted by Tim Heston and Caleb Chamberlain. The podcast is produced and edited by Garrett Slager and Dana Weicker. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.
Bam, done.